Okay, we are going to do one word problem for a real life application of working with our polynomials. So in this situation, we have the length of a rectangular shaped park is 3x plus 5. The width is 2x plus 8. The area of the park is 360 square miles, and we need to know the dimensions. So this is quite involved. Here is what we're learning. We have 3x plus 5, and we have 2x plus 8. Okay, so we know that if we multiply these, 3x plus 5 times the 2x plus 8 would be equal to 360. So we can multiply and get 6x squared, so that's first terms, the outer terms 24x, the inner terms 10x, and the last terms 40 is equal to 360. In order to be able to solve this, we have to do a couple things first. One, we want to combine like terms. So 6x squared plus 34x plus 40 is equal to 360. But now we need to make this equal to 0. So we want to subtract 360 from both sides. 6x squared plus 34x minus 320 is equal to 0. So if we factor this trinomial completely, then we will be able to use the zero product property to solve for x. So we want to use the rainbow method. When you multiply 6 times a negative 320, you get negative 1,920. So that's going to make, like, there's a lot of factors of 1,920. In fact, if you take the square root of just the absolute value here, 1,920, you would basically have to test 43 factors, right? Or 43 numbers, 1 through 43, in order to be able to come up with the right one. So we're going to have to use some common sense. We know that we need the sum of the numbers to be a positive 34. So a couple things. If this is negative, then we have a positive and a negative. So if this is positive, then the highest absolute value is positive, and so we're looking at the difference of these two numbers to be 34. Since it ends in 0, we know that it's divisible by 10 and all the powers of 10 or factors of multiples of 10. So let's start with 40, right? If you take 1,000, let's just ignore the negative for right now. We can figure out which factor is negative after we find the two factors. So let's divide this by 40. So we would get 40 times 48. Okay, 40 times 48. Well, the difference of these two is 8, not 34. So that's not going to work. So let's try 30. So 1,920 divided by 30. 1,920 divided by 30 is equal to 64. The difference between 30 and 64 is 34. So just from using some logical, problem solving techniques, you just don't want to start with 1. 1 times 1,920 is definitely not going to give us a difference of 34. So the numbers had to be a little bit closer together. Now, we said we needed the higher absolute value to be positive, which makes this one negative. So we want to break up our 34 into a negative 34x and a positive 64x. So we're going to do that right here. So we'll have 6x squared minus the 30x plus the 64x minus the 320 is equal to 0. So that we'll divide it here, and we're going to work here. So we can factor out a 6x for sure. So we'll be left with x minus 5. Okay. All right. And then on this side, well, we're looking like we need x minus 5 here. So that means we would have to factor out a 64. We need to know, is 64 a factor of negative 320? And it is. So we can factor out a 64, and we're left with, when you take 320 divided by 64, believe it or not, 5. Okay. still equal to 0. So we have our binomials here. We have the x minus 5 and we have the 6x plus 64. So 6x plus 64 times x minus 5. That's equal to 0. And honestly, this isn't even factored completely complete because we could, we forgot a step right here. That would have been a lot easier if we would have just factored out any common factors there. Okay, so right here, since you can see these two do have a common factor, they do have a common factor of 2. So really, you could just to factor it completely, you could say, okay, that's 2 times, not a 6. It would be a 3x plus 32 times x minus 5 is equal to 0. And in this case, you have 3 factors, but since 2 does not equal 0, right? 2 does not equal 0, we can just discount that altogether. So that's completely gone. So we either have 3x plus 32 equal to 0, or we have x minus 5 equal to 0. And these are how we're going to solve for x. So for the first one, you're going to subtract 32 and then divide by 3. So if we subtract 32, you have negative 32 divided by 3. And when we go to multiply this, we do not want negative values because they do not have any application with length width measuring. So this is an erroneous answer. We do not need to consider this answer. So we would add 5 to both sides, so x is equal to 5. When x is equal to 5, we have 3 times 5 plus 5. So for the length, we would have 20 miles. Here, we would have 2 times 5 plus 8. We'd have 18 miles. So our dimensions are 20 miles and 18 miles. What are the dimensions of the park? And I know that was a lot of work, but that's why we're learning to do this math. It's a lot of keeping track. Had we factored out the 2 here, we would have been dealing with a number a lot smaller than 1,920. It would have been 480, and the problem solving would have been following the similar steps. So we will be practicing more of these to come.